Thank you for attending our next session.
Yes, welcome everyone to the Brass Fall 2023 Online Symposium. I'm Brian Garrison, Chair of the Symposia Committee. This is our third session. Thank you to our subcommittee members, Christy Cunningham, Doris Drui, Christine Pollock, and Angel Truesdale. All sessions will be recorded and sent out to those who have registered. Please mute your audio and video as we get started. Thank you for spending time with Brass and our presenters today. Now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Doris Drui, to get us started.
Thank you very much, Brian. And so our next session is brought to us by Liz Grau from the University of Dayton. And the title of her session is Professional Redevelopment, Combining Information and Business Professional Perspectives in Information Literacy Instructions. So Liz, please take it away. We're looking forward to hearing everything you have to share.
Sorry about that. I lost my unmute button. Hi, everyone. Yep, so I'm Liz Grau. I'm excited to get started. So I have a lot of slides here today. There will probably be a few that have text that you don't have time to read, and that's okay. I think they're going to be sent out. But really what I'm focused on talking about today and the outcomes you can expect are an increased understanding and awareness of the information skills that are critical to business professionals, so who our students will become after the classroom, and some ideas about new ways to demonstrate the importance of information literacy and business research in the business profession during one-shot instruction sessions. So I'll be talking a lot about personas and the path from college to professional life. So before we get started, take about 60 seconds to share a little bit about yourself. There's a QR code here, and I believe Doris will send a link in chat too, but it's just a quick making sure your Padlet's working for you and just to see who everyone is. I don't know why I'm not seeing results, so that's a bummer. Okay, cool. So kind of what I already knew a little bit of, but I'm interested to see is how many folks have previous business field experience or a business degree. So it's just always really interesting to see where people came from. So I'll introduce myself a little bit about my background. So I'm Liz. I do have a business background. For the 15 years before I was a librarian, I was in the business field. I worked for a variety of small companies and startups. I also owned my own business. And I kind of did a little bit of everything because I work for small businesses. Most recently, I was the director of marketing for a software company. And then I kind of decided during my time in private industry that I was really interested in becoming a librarian, specifically an academic librarian. So I went to library school and I took my librarian role here at UD in July. So I am here as the digital pedagogy librarian, but I am also the liaison to our business school. And if you're not familiar with the University of Dayton, we are a private university in the Midwest, heavily residential. Of over 90% of our undergraduates live on campus. And I looked up the statistics. 27% of our first year students this year are business majors. So our business school serves a lot of our student body. So moving on, we're going to talk today about really like what I've learned and observed in my first 6 months as a librarian. So I am new to this field, but in the spirit of redevelopment, I'm really thinking about the biases that I bring in as a person who has used information in a business setting and also as a previous business student. And also taking what I'm learning as a librarian with my students to think about who our students are and how they see them and how they see themselves, and then who they will be. So what they're taking with them when they leave the university and go into the real world, which I put in quotes and heavily encourage folks to do. And then I want to talk about how we really bridge that gap between the threshold between student and professional, because it's really not that wide. And then in knowing who we're serving, where they'll go, how can we think about information literacy differently? And finally, my purpose for doing all of this talking is that I will share some of the instructional work that I'm doing to try to bring some of these ideas into the classroom. And the reason I have so many slides is because it's a basis for some of my research. So I will try to be brief. So I'm starting with business in the classroom. And just by the raw numbers, it's a lot. 19% of all bachelor's degrees in the US in the 2020-2021 school year went to business majors. In the US, more students graduate with bachelor's and master's degrees in the business field than in any other research domain, and it's by a huge margin. It's pretty significant. Over 100,000 more business degrees are awarded each year than those in like the health professions, and that makes up 13%. So it's a lot. And like I said, at my institution, our undergrad enrollment is always over a quarter of the institution of the School of Business. And really almost a quarter of US master's degree recipients are in the business field. So when you look at these cumulatively, it accounts for more than 25% of the folks who were graduating. So there's a lot of them. The impact is large. What they're learning here or what they're not learning here is what they're taking with them into the world, both professionally and as humans. So there's a lot of them. It's good to know. But like, who are they? So you might already be familiar with empathy mapping, which I know is more frequently used in education settings, but something in my redevelopment that I've brought over from the marketing world is building out user personas. In my business life, I would build out user personas to understand how to choose and implement and prioritize different features and products, and really who is going to be impacted by the use of something and like what's their motivations for doing so. So I've kind of adapted this a little bit, and part of what I've done is looked at what matters for when you're thinking about students. So where do they come from? What's their background? What did they learn before they were in college? What kind of work experience have they had? Are their families involved in business? And then their traits. What are they like? What do they do? What are their ambitions? So educationally, do they just want to graduate? Do they want to go to grad school? What do they care about there? Personally, why are they in school? Professionally, where do they want to go? What are they interested in? What scares them? Why might they not do something? And what incentivizes them to learn? And then what tests them? So what things are they encountering that make their lives more difficult? So as an exercise, I'd like to take a minute to have everyone, again, open a Padlet link, which I think Doris will put in the chat, but share who your students are. Share what you know about them. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just dropping a few things is great. Yeah, and it's interesting to see what a variety of components there are to folks, right? Especially when you're looking at what's their background. My university has a very affluent student body. It's growing in diversity, but it's not serving that many first-gen students. It is a private university. It has fewer Pell eligible students. And yeah, fulfilling family obligations, starting their own business, upscaling, just graduating. I know for some of my students, they're like, I just want to graduate. I don't know what I want to do. So I think it's important to think about that, because there's no real there's no real way to categorize students as a group. That being said, I am going to go ahead and categorize students as a group, and think about really what does what does, after looking at big numbers and more personal details, what are students' information universes typically like in an academic environment? And when I'm thinking about the academic environment, I'm thinking about four-year colleges. I'm thinking a lot about undergraduates because it is such a large amount of people, but this also encompasses MBA students and non-traditional non-traditional students who are going to school part-time or who are coming back to school after a time away, 2 and 4 year degrees also. So we're looking at things like their skills and drills. What do they have in the tool belt? So they have access to business databases, usually, whether they know it or not. They have tools that are assigned by their professors. They have often some kind of foundational library knowledge, whether it was something they remember or not. Hopefully it's there. And they're looking for things like industry profiles, company data, market reports, things that are assigned in their classes that they need to look at. They're also looking for data and financials for analysis and quantitative work they need to do. And they're looking for different research and insights as they get into more advanced coursework. So it's pretty typical. It's what we see in our research guides. We know this. And one that I added in there that is coming up a lot in my institution is career information. So there's a lot of students who are really coming to the library because they want to know how to look into career information beyond just job postings. So there's a lot of things in their universe, and this is within the context of their business studies. It's much bigger when you look at their social universe, but to keep it realistic, I'm staying there. And then their information behaviors. So, this is both from research and things that I encounter in my life that I know most people do. So the Googling it, they're starting with what they know. They prefer Google and search engines. I have a lot of students who are using it as a gateway. I'm happy to see, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly. But their searching is not very deep. They go to what's familiar. They trust the first page of results. They assume that relevance and credibility is indicated by what they see right away. And if it's not there, a lot of times they give up, which I can understand. A little bit of cognitive bias, which I don't think is necessarily intentional, but they're looking for correct answers. They're looking to match. So it's finding what fits. It's the control F. I had a student come into my office because he didn't think any of the papers he was finding were relevant, because he had to tell his professor what the theoretical framework was. And when he control F'd to search for the term theoretical framework, it wasn't in the paper. And that wasn't the case. We were able to talk about frameworks, but just kind of that. On the good side, they want the right information, right? Like this is not a deficit approach. It's the reality. This is what they're doing. And then I see a lot of structure seeking. We see this in the literature too. But just tell me where to look. Like if there are library guides, if they don't know how to find them, if it's not where they're already looking in their Canvas or whatever system you're using, they don't know if they're there, but when they're accessible, they want to see that. They want to see a list, which can be limiting, but also it's where they are. And then information challenges, another thing we're familiar with. The curricular limitations is a big one. Business school accreditation standards don't include InfoLit and research skills. It's not inherently part of the curriculum. Business faculty are often overwhelmed with the ideas about information literacy, rightly so. It's a huge topic. This is going to be an overwhelming presentation. It's overwhelming for me to think about, and it's my job. There's a lot of parts of the curriculum that just don't make room for adding more content. And a lot of our library instruction is one shot. So the retention, the focus on like, they need to know how to use this tool to do this thing can often seem like it takes a lot of priority. Search strategies are another one. even just identifying their information need or specifying the research question, developing effective keywords and search mechanics, and then looking at like a wide variety of sources. I have a lot of students who will start with our Discover page, which goes through everything we have and everything available in like other people's libraries. And it's so much. So they actually are looking at a really wide variety of sources, but in their mind, it's just one, and it's so much it's not meaningful. And then just the willingness to dedicate the time to the search, and then finding things that are appropriate and correct. We see a lot of students who are saying something's an academically approved or a library resource, so it's obviously credible, it's good, like don't need to think about it any further, which is not awesome. Understanding of authority, and then just proprietary issues. This is something we're all familiar with. So embargoes, especially for business students who need current information, embargoes are a huge problem. Paywalls, the cost of membership to different professional organizations, the cost of subscription to some databases, and then intellectual property. So when they're looking to do company research, they can only find what's publicly available. These are not surprises. But looking at this, there's an article that came out earlier this year that was really looking at information behaviors and literacy within a graduate course, and it started to categorize student behaviors into 3 phases: the need, the collect, and the use. So the need of like, what do I need to find? The articulation of that information need, the process of finding and selecting it, and then applying it. And I find this to be a really useful framework for thinking about the context of how a need arises and why or where they're looking for information and how they're using it. And then starting to lining up with behaviors and challenges, in part because you can see where there's things that are occurring in each step along the way, right? So the following directives, like I want someone to tell me what to do. I get it. I want someone to tell me what to do too, but that's something to think about, is where is the gap where the need for someone to direct where to go is making that a limitation, or is influencing their behavior. And then the challenges, the curricular limitations, we know it's a big thing in our way. So now that we've gone through what we probably already know, and you're like, thanks, Liz. I remember my first year of librarianship. Thank you for indulging me. I want to talk about business in the real world. Again, heavy quotation marks. I put a picture here of one of our student groups that does business advising for actual like real world clients. So they're doing real world work, and they're doing things that have impact on decisions that are made within different industries. This group in particular was working on Preschool Promise, which is like the state administered preschool program. So the real world is a spectrum. And I also got yelled at once for saying the real world in a business meeting on campus, so I won't do it again. So this is focusing on who our students will become. They're with us for a super short period of time. So we're both meeting them when they're in this formative time where they're learning a lot of things and we have a lot of opportunity to help them with it. But we also don't really know what happens when what they learn and retain goes into a new environment. There are some things we do know, though. Folks with business degrees fall into quite a few occupational groups, but there are really heavily concentrated ones. So management, business and financial operations, those are the 2 most robust occupational categories for students graduating with a business degree. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, almost a quarter of all employed people who have a bachelor's degree have a bachelor's degree in business. So it's a lot of our workforce. And by the numbers, there's a lot of like specific occupational like subgroups that they fall into. So it's managers, it's financial managers, management analysts, lots and lots of accountants. But there's some groups in there that are really, really rapidly growing, particularly financial managers and management analysts, which you also might be more familiar with as consultants. They're growing faster than most other occupations in the country. And like, to put it in perspective, in the business world, I think it's only like 4% projected growth for accountants. So those professions are becoming much larger, and both of them are heavily reliant on business information and research, and drive a lot of business decisions. And just to really drive the point home about like the scope of where business students go, these are just looking at the financial manager and management analyst employment industries. They're in all different industries. So it's not just people who are like doing business school and being business people. They're in science fields, they're in health fields, they're in manufacturing and construction. So every organization has folks with business backgrounds who are making business decisions that impact people in different ways. So I thought it would be helpful to start thinking about the way information and research behavior happens in different environments, to just kind of look at the persona of these two growing fields. So starting with the financial manager, this is a nice one to look at for two reasons. One is that financial managers are typically further along in their career. This is not an entry-level job. It's also a career field where a lot of the skills and the information tools folks get a lot of hands-on training with. So they have a little bit higher level baseline of knowledge of how information should be collected and used. The decisions they make are super impactful. These are the people making budget decisions. They're the people who are deciding when layoffs need to happen. They are impacted by and impact the economy. But they're really focused on driving business value, minimizing risk. They want to make sure these goals are met because it impacts so many people. And they're challenged by different things too that not necessarily are seen in school. So fiscal stress. So like the stress of keeping your company afloat. That's a big deal. It's a high impact information need. Ethical considerations and concerns, legal considerations and concerns, the economic and political climate, what kinds of influences are there. So those are things that maybe don't directly equate to things that we're experiencing in the classroom. And then the next one, which is kind of nice that it just happens to be the second fastest growing business field, is management analyst. And it's nice because this is an early career field. This is like kind of there are different levels of it, but most folks in this field are entry level or have fewer than 5 years of work experience. And there's all kinds of management analysts and management consultant roles. They're really making recommendations to different companies that they don't work for about how to increase profits and be more productive and select good products. There's a lot of labor involved with that. And their information universe looks a little bit different. They already have college experience, but they also have professional experience and on-the-job training, some practical knowledge. They need a lot of the same kind of information, but also they have a lot of internal information and they're collecting it and using it. What is a little bit different, though, is that they don't have these library subscriptions. They don't necessarily have these big databases. They're super expensive. Even if a company buys it, not everyone has licenses. And their peer and network relationships become really important for the information sharing. And their information behaviors also are a little bit different. They're starting small. They're looking at when they're making a decision or starting a project, the most likely place to start is with files they already have, information they already have, looking through company information and asking colleagues. There's a lot of pressure on speed and getting things done in tight deadlines. So knowing what has already been successful, what they already know how to use, great place to start. Something fast, something that doesn't require a lot of interpretation. Fast facts, quick facts, big win. But like another behavior is that they're talking to the people who are around them and using that information to make decisions. And there is an implied sense of authority and credibility based on a person's status and title. But their information behaviors are really driven by making decisions and the use of information and making sure that it is appropriate. So their challenges, and the thing I really want to point out is that anything that was a challenge in business school that was not overcome is still going to come in. It doesn't go away. It's not magic. It's still going to happen in the quote unquote real world. And then there's new things, new environments, new bureaucracy, all of that. It's a struggle. So again, you can use this need, collect, use framework to look at where are these needs coming from? Like, how are they arising? What kind of sources of information do they have? And what outcomes do they need? And where are the behaviors and challenges that are kind of stretching across? And you can think about this as like the prior knowledge one's a big one. This really shows us how important it is to think about how we're preparing students with the information skills they need to be able to make these decisions and guide these behaviors, especially in an environment where they will have less access to some of the tools that we have. All right, so how do we reconcile all this information? Really, if you look at it together, there's a lot of overlap between the sources of information that folks will use in the academic and professional world. They have all of the same challenges, just in different manifestations. Similar behaviors, the origin of need often comes from like, this is a thing you have to do. I need you to provide this information to make a decision. Maybe it's a career decision, maybe it's a major decision, maybe it's a financial decision. And also they're going to be using information for personal interest. So the BRAS business competencies think about all learners, all users of information in the business world as knowledge workers. And that's how I've started to frame out how I think about business students as I'm engaging in workplace or in classroom information structure. And I break it down into two kinds of categories, skills and literacies. So skills are task-based, identifying and navigating tools that house information, developing search strategies. And then the literacies come from being able to articulate needs, being able to understand what tools to use, being able to think about it. And then at the next level, it's occupational tasks and knowledge work. So all the things they do in academia, but also the things that their employers expect. So be able to use information to inform decisions, create and distribute information. And then the higher level literacies that are involved in that knowledge work, ideally, which are recognizing power, recognizing context, looking at it in both ways. And these can be mapped to the BRAS research competencies, looking at both foundational and topical competencies and thinking about it as task or knowledge work. And also the ACRL framework, which is a little bit easier because you can look at practices and dispositions, which kind of map a little bit more easily. And this is a really long way to say there's a way to look at each step of the need, collect, use phases of information and identify which frames and competencies you might want to instruct to or to prioritize in your instruction. Which leads to this need-led knowledge building and thinking about really where are the students that we're meeting at? Is it their first year in college and they're at novice level? And there's indicators that we can think about knowing how these competencies come in. So what are the behaviors? Are they saying, I need you to tell me what my research topic is? Or are they saying, here's a topic and I have a couple questions about it? That can help us assess where they're at. Are they, when they're collecting information, where are they? Are they just like looking at Google and only going to Google and only going to the first page? Or are they doing something a little bit more in depth? And how are they using information? How are they applying it? So starting to frame things based on their behaviors, their needs, and then where they're falling within their actual use and navigation of information can help us to develop and augment our instruction to meet them where they're at and help them get to a new level. And really, yeah, the novice level, they have a task, they're matching it with a skill. Intermediate, they have a task, they're thinking about a question about it, and they're matching it with multiple skills and also using some different competencies, like they're telling us what kind of information they probably need. And then the expert level is doing all that, but it's within contextual disposition, good practice ways. So what about our contexts? And I'm getting to the end of my time, so I'll use a little bit of my discussion time for us to work together on this and just share live feedback. But you know, the dream is that the library would be the center of the universe. We'd be fully resourced. We would be part of the accreditation process for business schools. You know, all the money, all the vocational awe, everything would be great. We know the reality is we have the resources we have. We are working to develop relationships every day. And really, there's just a lot going on in our students' lives. So what I've been working on with all this information that I just spewed at you is thinking about how to restructure some of the one-shot instruction that we do to focus on where students are going and help them build their own path to get there. So there's always going to be a component of having to teach some tools and skills, but how do we make that the secondary part of it, knowing that their environment is going to change and it's going to change in only a couple of years? How do we prepare them for different environments? So the exercise that I'm going to share is what I have not named. It has a draft stamp. You are one of the first groups to play this with me, but it's called it's a persona exercise. So the idea is that a small team is assigned a professional persona. It's about a person and a workplace scenario, and they have to, without library resources, complete an information task. So the goals are that they can articulate an information need, identify the criteria they need, find the appropriate sources, a good array of them, and evaluate the information. And this is structured based on where they are. So if you're going into a freshman class, you're going to give them, you'll know they're probably novices, you're probably going to give them that information need. But it's built to map to their curriculum and their assignments, and also to make sure that they have room for a reflection and ways to connect where they were missing information to what they could use at the library, and also ways they could think about it next time. So the elements are a persona. Personas, when I've been building them, there's only a few right now, but they always have a photo, they always have a name, they always have a bio, because we want them to be real. The scenario follows kind of a standard format. I've been working here for this long. My normal focus is this. My boss asks me to do this task so that they can XYZ, and I have this much time to do it. At my disposal, I have these internal sources of information and these external tools. And it asks the students to prepare, identify what they need and where they need to start, to actually act and start collecting it, and then to reflect on what they found and what they didn't find and what issues they ran into. So if we have time, okay, Doris just shared it in the chat. I'd like you guys to take some time and play this with me. So I'll open it up. So this is a Padlet board. It's not ideal, but there's a persona. It's Annie Smith, who's a 32-year-old product manager. She is loosely based on me. She was a professional generalist, works for small companies on new projects, very adept at software acceptance testing and user interviews, has had limited training on the job, but she really wants to influence her product and make sure that she's building strong relationships. And I'll let you guys read, or I'll read the scenario. So the scenario is that she's been working for an 18-month-old software company for 3 months, focused on writing product requirements and understanding user needs. Her boss asked her to provide information about the market for a new product, a smart pen, in order to determine a sales price. They need inputs before before a meeting at the end of the week with the company's finance manager. The information will influence their decisions about price and will be included in a pitch deck for a meeting with an investor later this month. So you have access to your internal information. You know about the product and its requirements. You also have your own notes because you've been writing requirements. And your company has subscriptions to Wall Street Journal and Forbes. You love TechCrunch. You read it all the time. You're active on LinkedIn, and you have unbounded access to Google. So these are the kinds of questions that I ask students, and I open it to you to participate, but I would also just open the floor to discussing all the things I talked about, which took way longer than I thought, and any questions or feedback that you have while you do it. And when I've done this in the classroom, I phase it out. So I'm not using a Padlet necessarily. I'm usually using a different tool that I have here, but I'll have the students brainstorm questions, and then I will ask them to pick 1 or 2 of these questions to move on to the next thing. So listing all the questions and being like, okay, like asking them to do this actual assignment that's in this scenario would be a huge thing to do in an hour. It's a huge thing to do in the time period that Annie has to do it. So thinking about that too, of kind of not overwhelming the students with the tasks, but really thinking through like one at a time can be really nice, because it's 50 to 75 minutes of their lives, and it's a lot. And kind of like a way that I use some of the need, collect, use template is to look at the answers that are coming in, and I walk around and I work with the students as they're doing this to see, like, you know, the types of information are, how much do they know about the kinds of information that exist. So this is a place where the BRASS framework or the BRASS competencies come in really well. Like how much information are they aware of? How much have they learned in the classroom already? What things might they not be thinking of, or what vocabulary do we use that they don't use, which I think is really important. Because they don't need to learn the vocabulary necessarily. We probably need to speak business speak a little bit better. Search for smart pens on my favorite websites. Yeah. Visibility. Yeah. And as this moves on, you know, like the actual, we don't have time for it today, but the actual exercise of searching, something that I've been working with, and I had started this kind of in a more traditional model with academic research, but is having them keep a log of where they looked. So this was helpful when we were introducing different databases and different journals, but writing down, I went to Google, I searched this and I found nothing. And it's something that I get eye rolls about, but students have gone back to it, and it's helped me understand how they're searching it. And I don't know, this is kind of the foundation of what I want to learn from this exercise and research is the act of knowing what you did wrong and actually keeping a list of it, something that can help encourage better information behaviors and better resiliency and deeper search behaviors. So thank you for indulging me. I'm building out more personas and scenarios, and welcome anyone's ideas at any time. I love building personas because of going through stock images, so it's really fun. And since we're getting close on time, I want to make sure we have time for discussion. What I'm planning to do with this moving forward is more of the tactical build out. So identifying more scenarios. I have a couple business faculty members who are being very gracious in working with me on this. So helping to develop scenarios that are appropriate for their topic, their domain, and their class, but that really do reflect things that happen in actual things that have happened, like the true crime of business. I have on that side been talking to folks on the business end who I know who are involved in entrepreneurship and asking them, like, tell me about a time when you were at work and you had a boss who asked you to do something that was kind of a wild request to make, and you needed a lot of information that you just didn't have access to the databases to. So building out those more personas and more activity materials. So Padlet has worked here. The tool I've been using internally is more of like a Jamboard kind of thing. It's not ideal. It doesn't scale well. It's kind of a mess. So figuring out how to do that and how to invite better reflection. Instructionally, I'm looking for differentiation opportunities. So thinking about the novice, intermediate, and expert levels, but also thinking about students who are not, who don't speak English as their first language, or who have other accommodations, and how this can be something that is useful to them, and my students who are hybrid or not on campus. Assessment techniques. So how do I know if they're learning, and curricular connections, really starting to find better ways to build activities like this into the curriculum. And I'm also doing some testing and revision. So you guys, this was my largest prototype group ever. And I'm inviting cross-curricular review within my library and the other liaisons, engaging with business faculty, doing a classroom pilot, and kind of structuring this into how I want to adapt this assignment and what I want to learn from it and how I can take it to build out more of my research interests, which is really that threshold from school into the business world. So that's what I have. I'm happy to take questions or yeah, any feedback. And I'm getting caught up in the chat now.
I don't see any questions that have come in your chat, but lots of great compliments on what a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I packed so much information into this. It is my current research baby. I couldn't stop myself. I mean, I say multiple personas. I do agree. Yeah. Something I saw with the personas when I was looking at some of the ways that different product and design groups do it is they have decks. So they make, and I don't know how I would make this happen. I do not have a budget to have printed card decks, but it is something I have been interested in. Is this all completed in a one shot? So a scaled version of this, it's kind of scaled up actually, but yes, it is completed in a one shot. I've only done it in my 75-minute one shots. And I have a very like structured timeline of how it works. I also have students working in groups of 4. And when I roll it out, I give them kind of one section at a time so we can guide it. And a lot of the reflection piece is happening live, and that's where I start to bring in library tools to demonstrate, or like databases, business databases to demonstrate how you might use them. But it has been small groups and 75-minute sessions.
Are there any other questions? Any shout outs at all, or chats? I don't see anything. Well, in the meantime, just in case you might be typing in the chat, I will send out the link to the surveys. So please take some time to complete that survey. Will be most appreciated. And Liz, thank you so much for an incredibly insightful presentation, and it was so well delivered as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome.